I really appreciate you joining me today.
Yep.
Um, I don't think we've ever met before. I know, I know you from your YouTube. I know you from your Discord. I know you from your disciples, we'll say, your fans, right? Um,
I don't. I'll have
and
to think about which word I prefer: disciples or fans.
um, yeah, language does appear to be kind of the name of the game in this space, and as a side note, I am just cannot get over how frustrated I am that my microphone does not work.
These things happen.
I mean, I've been preparing for this for weeks.
Oh
So,
no!
it's all good. Yeah, I've had whenever I prepare for a big conversation with somebody, whether it's a job interview or a date or whatever, right? I always have the conversation in my head over and over and over and over again, right? And generally, I know where I want to start, right? So I start where I want to start, and I go where I want to go, or I start where I want to go, and I work backwards, right? I have no idea where to start this and where to end this, right? The reason you're here is essentially back during the heyday of the pandemic. Um, I found myself in an odd community of people that were all surrounding this figure named Eric Weinstein, right? And I was desperately looking for a way to be productive, a way to export whatever professionals have identified as my non-neurotypical way of thinking and looking at the world, and export that to other people, because people were saying to me, you think different, right? You should export that somehow, right? And when I came to Eric's community, I got this message from the great beyond, which said, there is a field. I want you to find the field. In that field, there is a pearl. I want you to buy the field and find the pearl, right? And once you find that pearl, I want you to bring it to Eric Weinstein, right? And I didn't know what any of that meant, but I went and found the field, right? And I took my savings and I bought the field, right? And I looked through that field blade by blade and I found the pearl, right? And as I was instructed, I brought the pearl to Eric and he took it in his hands and threw it away. And so I became kind of disillusioned by that, right? Because I also had to get to the point where you give him the pearl, you have to get an audience with this man, right? Yeah. So like the whole way, it was just like boom, problem, success, problem, and I got to the point where it all failed. So I thought, why don't I just start having conversations with people about something that I'm interested in? And I reached out to a watchmaker in France and wanted to talk about beauty and aesthetics, and what is it about these little circular objects that just have captivated our, they just enchant us. We fall under a spell when we see them, almost like Medusa, right? And yet, like, if I just took a circle and put it on a piece of leather, it's not the same, right? And so I was really, really interested in talking to him about it, but he was a little more technical, a little less philosophical, right? And talked to me about how enamored he was with titanium. And I wasn't really happy with the interview. I didn't feel like I was really that articulate. And also, given some other things that had happened during the pandemic, I suffered some great life troubles, right? And I decided not to publish it. And a couple years went by, and I never published it. And I came across a couple of your videos and saw that you were touching on some of the topics that I was interested in as far as beauty was concerned. And I reached out to you, and here you are. So thank you so much for joining me. Just as ground rules, I'll say that kind of my mission statement is that my relationship with you is more important than winning a point or being correct. All right. And you can take that to mean however you want it to mean. I know what it means to me, right? It essentially means that, you know, staying in community with you is more important than convincing you that I'm right.
Okay. Sounds like a good rule.
It's a heuristic that gets me through most situations pretty well. The other thing I'll say is that, you know, if I cross a line, if I say something that is offensive to you, hurtful, uncouth, or there's spinach in my teeth, just please let me know. That is the only way I learn.
All right.
So, you know, my orientation is I'm a nobody, right? I'm just some guy who swings between tectonic plates of tautologies and ontologies and communities and heuristics, and just like, I'm not a normie, right? As your community would say, I am not a non-normie, right? Essentially, I like to be a specter, intellectually, spiritually, whatever that word means. But I was raised in a charismatic Catholic community, which was fashioned after the charismatic renewal of the Pentecostal outpouring at Duquesne University at the end of the 60s, right, which kind of revolutionized the Catholic Church as the Catholic Church was being revolutionized at the time, right? The priest turned around, he stopped speaking Latin. And so these communities popped up all over the United States, and I was raised in one of them. So
I don't know anything about this movement.
So at the end of the 60s, it was all peace and love, right?
Yeah.
Music was a huge way that people were communicating with transcendent experience.
Yeah.
And the Catholic Church at the time was having a huge identity crisis.
Yeah.
And they were making some major changes, right? Like turning the priest around, going from Latin, bringing people into the liturgy of the Mass, et cetera, right? Which conservatives hated, right? They were destroying the majesty of the Mass, so to speak, right? But one thing that Roman Catholics did not do was worship. That was not something that they participated in. Their worship was hymnal, right? Forever and ever, right? And it's this stoic, cold, hard, right? Essentially, it is music made of stone that is, you know, monolithic and cannot be moved, you can only degrade it, right? There's nowhere to go up. There's only room to go down. But the Baptists and the Pentecostals had this tradition of praising, right? Of lifting up their voices and singing and dancing and touching each other and just having this incredible, vibrant, productive, I would say, experience of prayer. And so what these college students were doing at Duquesne was essentially that, was praise and worship, lifting up of the hands, and participating in this very intentional, artistic, creative form of worship, right? And at Duquesne, at the specific prayer meeting, there was what is considered to be a Pentecostal outpouring of the Holy Spirit, where people were gifted with tongues, prophecy, healing, etc., right? And this experience is ritualized and repeated in these Catholic communities.
Wow. I knew that I've known, about some things about the Catholic charismatic revival, but this is, so you're a child of parents who were, what word shall we use? Impacted, changed, transformed by this.
Yes.
And so what was church growing up like for you?
Well, it was Roman Catholic Church. in the traditional, right? And then it was community, right? So massive prayer meetings that went on for hours, right? Really intense theological study outside of church. John Paul II's theology of the body was like the literal gospel for these people.
Wow.
You know, it was massive amounts of utilization of symbology, iconography. There was this weird backdoor into the Eastern Rite. And interestingly enough, right, like none of this protected them from what happened, which was the Catholic Church had to come and say, we are no longer associated with you whatsoever, right? The amount of monetary theft, child abuse, power wrangling, like they got to the point where they were telling which women were allowed to marry which men, right? They got to the point where if you went on a date with someone 3 times and you weren't ready to propose to them, you weren't allowed to date them anymore, right? They had strict diets of what they were allowed to eat, right? So it was not all sunshine and rainbows and praise Jesus, right? It was also a very strict system of control to make sure that this community continued, right? A computer company was set up that employed only members of the community, and then there was a lot of weird money things happening at that company, right? And eventually it got like an 8-page or an eight article series in the Washington Post, which is still up, where they go through the downfall of this community. So as a child, I was yanked out of the community by my parents, and when all of this fell apart, right, I was yanked out of the community and put into more, let's say, Protestant or less denominational kind of schooling, and I was being bullied, like, no matter where I was, right? Whether it was Catholic school or Christian school or whatever. So I was like, let me go to public school. That'll solve my problem, right? So then I went to public school and I got a real education. And, you know, and so it's just been this weird life of like not really knowing what's real or true, mainly because that is being obfuscated for me by people that have a real incentive to do so, right? Like my dad raised me under 2 male role models, right? As far as fatherhood, manhood, ethics, virtue, integrity, right? We had all their books, right? The one man was Ravi Zacharias. The other man was Bill Cosby. So,
wow, what a pair.
Right. And up until that point, there was no reason to believe that either of these people were anything but good, right?
Of course.
But given what they turned out to be, right, some of the most productive rapists in the world, it makes you really wonder, like, right, because there's a verse in the Bible that says, you know, a rotten tree bears no good fruit, you know? Which I don't really think is true, but it's a fun heuristic to levy at Christians when they try to defend Ravi Zacharias or something like that, right? And so what brings me to beauty, right? Well, it seems to me that beauty is an arresting experience. It stops us in our tracks, and our interaction with that experience colors the rest of our experiences in which beauty is not present. And I find that it's really hard to agree on what a just society looks like, or what a healthy relationship looks like, or what love towards a child looks like, unless we can agree on what is beautiful. Because I've seen people do some ugly things in the name of beauty, right? And I've seen people do some beautiful things in the name of ugliness. And, you know, this is where I get really scared in talking to you, because you use a lot of words that I don't know the definitions of, and then you use some other words that I'm like allergic to, right? Like the word spirituality, I'm allergic to. I break out in hives when I try to define it. And it seems to me like a wild card, like a jack or an ace, where I throw the card out and I say what it means, and you choose to accept that or not. Or I throw the card out and we both accept that it's a wild card, meaning whatever I want it to mean right now might change, right? And so if we throw around words like spirituality without actually being clear on what we mean, right, we could get into trouble, right? In the same way that if I were to tell you, take calcium carbonate, and you didn't, you took cyanide instead, right? And so, like, you know, calcium has this really interesting property in that we both know exactly what we're talking about when I say calcium, right?
But do we?
Well, you know
mean,
that I'm talking about
calcium
an element.
chloride. You're talking about an element, but I mean that is rolling around in our imaginaries in different ways. If I were a chemist, having a ton of experience with calcium, you know, because when I hear calcium, part of me hears, oh, you need, you know, my mother for a while, because she was getting up in years, had to take calcium supplements. So then there's NaCl, which is salt, and so there's sort of calcium in there. And then, you know, so in other words, there's a sense in which we can point to the periodic table and say Cl, and we sort of can rattle off a whole bunch of things about that, but this gets into this question of knowing.
Yes, and my rebuttal would be, yes, we can get into an argument about what calcium is, and I can bring out a white powder and say this is calcium, right? And you can say I disagree with you, right? The important feature of calcium in the context of what we're talking about right now is that I can prove it. I can prove it to you, and I can prove it to you in a way that you would find acceptable, right? And this is really non-controversial, right? Like, planes almost never crash, right? Why? Because they can prove it. They can prove that the things that they're practicing work. To the point,
I'd rather say we can demonstrate it.
Okay, they can demonstrate it, right?
Because I could be just stubborn and say, you're never gonna prove to me that what you have in that jar is calcium. So there's the first personal built into that, but you can demonstrate it. You could say, look, this is calcium because these are things we know about calcium, and here I can demonstrate this is calcium, and that demonstration will be good enough, usually good enough for, but then you're also going to get into purity, because is that pure calcium? Well, it's pure enough, because there's always going to be other things that are in that. So I mean, that's part of and getting understanding the limitations of the propositional are really helpful, because I think part of why we're reaching the end of modernity is because we have reached the limitations of the propositional and it's been overplayed. And you don't want to dismiss it and say, calcium doesn't exist. That doesn't help any of us. But sort of understanding calcium in its proper order in our world.
Yeah, my other example was like Spider-Man or Gandalf, right? It's like, even though we would agree that those two people aren't real, the image of Spider-Man, boom, right in your head when I say that, right? Red suit, webs.
When you say real, I see, and that's where I would say, that's not the best word to use. I would say physical.
They're fictional characters, right?
Okay.
Like
so is Paul Vanderklay. But I'm also physical.
Well, you're not fictional, though.
There's a lot of fiction about me out there.
Well, Dan Crenshaw, like a congressman, recently got into a lot of trouble in this case when I don't know if you heard about this.
Yeah, but that gets into the question of, is Uncle Sam real?
So, yeah, and that's the point I'm trying to get to, right? It's this weird valley of weirdness, right? Of like, I have 1 grain of sand, I have 2 grains of sand. Well, I keep putting sand on, eventually they're a pile, right? When did it become a pile, right?
Right.
And so I can't go near beauty as a topic without entering into this weird valley of like, what are we actually talking about here, right? Because to me, it seems like we don't really associate beauty with anything other than is seen and heard. Like I don't hear people tasting high-level sushi and saying beautiful, right? I don't see people touch it like this blanket behind me, right? It's really soft, really, really soft. But I would never describe that feeling as beautiful,
Yeah.
right? But I see a great blue heron, beautiful, right? I hear a violin, beautiful, right? So it seems that whatever the word is, beauty, kind of like the word Spider-Man or whatever, is referring to either an optical or auditory event. Do you get what I'm saying?
What about a beautiful formula or a beautiful solution?
Yeah. So what was the word used? Prepositional.
Propositional.
And you mean that?
So John Vervaeke has these 4 P's of knowing. One is the propositional, and then he's got the 3 others, which are, and I say the propositional is sort of third personal. It's kind of from above. The other 4 ways of knowing are procedural, how we do something, the participatory, which is we're doing something with, and the perspectival, which is, it's perspective. And those aren't necessarily propositional, but they much more embody this world. Jordan Peterson, for example, at the beginning of Maps of Meaning, says there are 2 ways to view the world. No, there are more than 2, but you can see the world as a place of objects, a place which is sort of empty, of objects, which are these discrete things like calcium, or a forum for action. And that kind of gets at the difference between the third personal and the first personal.
Okay. So, sorry, I just had to turn off the air. So when you say a beautiful formula or a beautiful solution, right, the beauty seems to be emerging from the car crash of the ideas in your mind, right? Like when you're analyzing a formula, you are kind of bringing different concepts together and making them fight. And the solution to the formula, or at least your analysis of the formula, is the victor, right, of that fight. And the way that they fought and the kind of the blood-stained tunic of the victor is what is said to be beautiful, right? Again, kind of I'm not arguing with you in this sense, but again, like I come back to, it's like I'm looking at something, right? It's like I'm seeing something. I'm not feeling it. I'm not smelling it. I'm not tasting it, right? I'm definitely like seeing it,
Beauty is definitely higher, more closely related to the visual or the auditory rather than necessarily the tactile or the or our taste buds. So that is true. It's not 100%, but you're right in seeing that correlation.
And how interesting it is that most of our symbols are not tactile symbols, right? We don't have any Braille symbols, right? They're all images, right? And there's auditory symbols too, like the Picardy third, right? It's a well established little musical trick that goes from, you basically go to a sustained chord beneath the major and then you resolve it up to the major third, and it was very much considered to be holy because when you play it for someone, it sounds happy, right? It's, and it just resolves at the end, right?
And
So,
even the word resolve is interesting in that, because you've got
tension.
3 notes, and what about the first 2 notes are resolved by the third? I mean, it's a fascinating question. And again, then beauty comes into there too, because resolved and beautiful are sort of connected as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can look at you can get on an oscilloscope, right, and show those 2 notes interacting, and you can actually see the tension in the sine waves, and then when they resolve into a harmonic, you can see that, right?
That's
you can actually
fascinating.
You can calculate. I mean, it's the way that, like, I don't think our interaction with the physical world is as novel as many philosophers would lead you to believe. But I wanted to show you a couple images, right?
Okay.
And just they're generally comparison images, right?
Okay.
And I just want to prime you and tell you that in the universe of things that a thing could be, right? These are almost the exact same image. Okay? I just want to see if you can see the difference, right?
Okay.
Before I dox myself by exposing my email.
People have done it before. That's why we're not live streaming.
So these are almost the exact same image, right?
Oh, interesting.
One strikes me as beautiful.
Yeah.
The other does not.
Yeah.
Right? Here's another. This one's famous.
Huh. That's interesting.
Almost the exact same image.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now this is you know, a play on a very famous, but you know, it's almost the Mona Lisa, right?
Yeah,
There's just a couple of details
yeah,
that have been distorted or disrupted, right?
yeah,
And your brain immediately rejects it, right?
yeah.
Now here is what I think is probably the most interesting comparison between 2 drawings of birds, right? I do watercolor, so I am really enamored with watercolor birds. I do not understand how all these little flicks of paint come together to just form this image, right?
Yeah.
But one, the one on the left is obviously done by a child, right? Obviously done by someone who does not really know how birds look, right? They kind of do, but they're missing a lot of features. Whereas the other one appears to be this rich, detailed experience. But when you actually zoom in on the second image, it turns into mush really quickly, right? And so, this distinction is so interesting to me because I think that this happens to people every day when they look at someone's face. They see one or the other. When they hear someone's voice, they hear one or the other, right? When they see a policy put forward by the government, they see one or the other, right? And it explains why people treat each other the way they do, kind of, right? Because if I'm seeing the image on the left, I'm not holding the door for you. I'm not listening to your rant about the dog that got out this morning, right? I'm not asking you, do you want anything from Starbucks, right? If you're the one on the right, I am waiting at your beck and call, right? And but when we think about the universe of things, right, we're not comparing a F-14 Tomcat with a banana. We're not comparing anger with the Beatles, right? We're comparing almost the exact same thing. And it's like, what is happening? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, do you see kind of why I'm so almost upset by this?
Yep, I get it. I get it.
And I wanted to know your thoughts,
Oh, it's women because I mean, beauty for men, certainly men operate in that ecosystem and economy, but women do more so. And so some of those dynamics women are especially attuned to, especially as they undergo transformations. Transformations might be gaining weight or losing weight, might be getting pregnant or having a child, it might be aging, it might be growing from a little girl who is not does not attract sexual interest as broadly as a post-pubescent teenager or young adult. Beauty, oh gosh, the power of beauty is all around us, and it is transformative. I forget what, someone did a study on, giving people images of things that have been recognized by many to be beautiful. Immersed in beauty made people more generous, for example. So, I mean, there's a whole world of study out there with respect to beauty. And no, it's a very big deal.
Yeah, you mentioned someone earlier that I'm familiar with, Jordan Peterson, right?
Yeah.
He said something on this a while ago. Everything he says kind of runs together in my mind, but it piqued my interest because I had never heard a distinction like this before, right? He was talking to, I think, Joe Rogan, great philosopher, Joe Rogan. That's a joke. And he said, actually, I can't remember if it was Brett Weinstein or if it was Jordan Peterson or if it was the conversation where they were together. But he said, can you imagine a woman who's beautiful and not hot? Right? And can you imagine a woman who's hot and not beautiful? Right? And I was like, oh my goodness, I can. Right?
Oh yeah.
And I was ashamed. I was instantly ashamed, right? At the objectification that was occurring in my mind, right? And then I was thinking, well, am I also objectifying the beautiful woman, right? Because I'm kind of putting them both on this auction block, right? To analyze, and I think, is that the purpose of beauty, right? Like, is it just a kind of a artifact of our genes that helps us discern which peacock is the most brilliant or which cardinal is the most red, right? Because the female cardinal has to have something inside her that tells her which one is the reddest, right?
Well, beauty, as is the three transcendentals, beauty, goodness, truth. Part of what people recognize about these things is that they are ends in themselves often. And the way you just phrased it, well, the beauty of the bird, the beauty of the woman, the beauty of the beauty is to achieve making it instrumental towards some other good or outcome. Now, we certainly do interact with beauty in that way in the world. The good host sets a beautiful table in order to achieve hospitality and perhaps even have that hospitality achieve other ends. And so beauty can be wielded and used as instrumental, but many have noted that part of the reason beauty plays the way it is because it has a telos, it has an end in itself that needs no other instrumentality often. And that it's just something to behold, and in that beholding, I mean, when we started off talking about this this charismatic, this charismatic awakening. And so often in moments like that, people are just drawn into beauty. I think of Keith Green, who was a evangelical musician in the early wave of Jesus music, which was about the same time. Oh Lord, you're beautiful. Your face is all I see. And you have that when you fall in love. A couple in love can sit and all they want to do is be in each other's presence. You have that in the 23rd Psalm. I want to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So there's an aspect to beauty that is an end point in itself, that in that sense, the instrumentality of it is sort of inconsequential, and it doesn't even need to be there because there's beauty and that's it. When people go to Yosemite Valley, I don't live that far from Yosemite Valley, and I love going there. It's fun watching tourists get off the bus, because once they step foot in the valley floor and they see El Capitan and Half Dome and this amazing valley, the beauty just, they've spent thousands of dollars, traveled thousands of miles, and just in that moment, there's no instrumentality necessary. Everything leading there, the air flight, the bus, the hotels, the money, all of that was instrumental towards just the beauty. It's an end in itself. And the same sometimes for goodness and truth. They just want to know, and this is where they sometimes come together. If you're working on this math equation and you work and you work and you work and you finally solve it or resolve it, and then it's just, there need be no other justification.
Yes. I think that is good, that pursuing beauty in and of itself, right? The getting on the plane, on the bus, being patient, making the sacrifice, eating the day-old chicken salad sandwich, right? Just so that you can see the firs, just so that you can hear the elk bugle call, right? Given that I'm a red-blooded man, this might be offensive, I don't know, but one of the most beautiful things in this universe are women to me. Right? And sometimes even more beautiful than the stars in the sky.
Absolutely.
Right? And what is weird to me is, over the pandemic, I picked up painting, like watercolor painting, and I'm real bad, like real bad, like that picture of the bird on the left, right? But I noticed that, like, there was like this rope around my neck, and if I just let it pull me, right, I produced art that was beyond my capabilities, right? And specifically, it is art of naked women, which are called nudes, right? And what's weird to me is that I can go to the National Portrait Gallery, right, 45 minutes away in DC, and see some of the most world-renowned, most beautiful paintings of naked women, right? But if I just got out a loose leaf piece of paper and I drew two circles, right, and put two dots in the middle of those circles, right, not beautiful. So, like, right, and I struggle with this because, like, recently my parents saw some of my paintings, right, and these paintings, like, are conservatives and liberals alike are like, these are beautiful paintings, right? But I'm ashamed to show them to people because there's this there's this pine tar stuck to, there's creosote soaking the telephone pole of my soul that says, this is wrong. This is, this is pornographic, right? And I don't know where to find myself in terms of beauty, because you're talking about a subject that I consider to be one of the most beautiful images in the world, right? The woman's form. And whether that's societal, whether that's baked into my blood, I don't know. All I know is I'm really good at painting it. And that's it, right? And so I have no interest in getting into like the very odd world of artists, right? And the way they think and the way they are, right? But at the same time, like, I do want to keep producing beautiful paintings. I don't know where to go, right? Because if I go to the church, they're going to be like, you should probably stick to birds, right? If I go to the artist, right, the kind of modern secular artist community, they're going to go, oh, you can go way farther than this, right? So like, I don't know. Sometimes I've described myself
There's a
as
lot of nudity in the Sistine Chapel.
not painted by a Christian though. So, yeah, where do we find ourselves in terms of beauty when the Sistine Chapel is covered in beautiful things that we also consider to be subversive or dangerous to our spirituality, so to speak? Is an example of Icarus flying too close to the sun, perhaps?
Well, where can we go is a big question. Specifically for you.
I can also close this can of worms and put it back in the fridge.
No, I'm not afraid of it. I mean, because I think many people will. There are. So I'll use the example of Jesus, and the woman Mary anoints Jesus, and Judas says, "This is terrible. This ointment could have been sold and the money given to the poor."
Yes.
There's the example of, I just preached a couple of weeks ago on John chapter 2, the miracle at Cana. Jesus makes an extraordinary amount of wine for a party that had gone on already
for a week.
There's beauty in that. There's when you were talking about beauty, I was thinking about when one of my grandfathers died, and watching my grandmother lean over into the casket and touch his face, his now dead, cold face. He was 90 when he died, and kissed his face. So there's an element, there's often an element of extravagance, of danger when it comes to all of the transcendentals, quite frankly. And beauty has long been known for its danger. The myth of Narcissus, who looks into the pool and is captivated by his own beauty. So we should not be surprised that there is danger in beauty and in our participation of that beauty. You've got behind you, you've got all kinds of guitars. It's, unless you belong to your roommate, but you've already made a musical reference. You also are drawn to the beauty of music, and there's tremendous power in that. And look at how musicians who rise to stardom, you know, in their 20s, you know, by the age of 27, they're going to have a crisis of sobriety. That's not disconnected from beauty. So the fact that drawing or painting nudes has an element of danger in it shouldn't surprise us. And by virtue of all of the other things in your life, you will have to figure out how you relate to that beauty, just like you have to figure out how you relate to the dangers of other forms of beauty. You know, someone could, let's say someone had the quest to bake the most perfect cake imaginable. You can wreck a marriage, wreck a family, wreck a relationship seeking that sort of beauty. I mean, all of these things, the best things in the world are full of danger. And, you know, human sexuality, you know, powerful drugs, powerful cars. I mean, we'll look at a car and see the beauty of an automobile. We'll see the beauty of a building. We'll see the, you know, so it's not as if beauty and danger don't in many ways go together. They always have.
Yeah, I've been wondering. I've been wondering, like, you know, because my mom, like, watching my mom, my super conservative Catholic mother, look at this painting, right, and just, right, I can see something happening in her, and what I want to believe is that she's looking at that and thinking, that's beautiful, right, and
Well,
then.
there's lots of layers involved there, though. Why do you want your mother's approval? She's your mom. You want the approval of your parents. Yet at the same time, if you took it to an art critic who said, yeah, these are good, you still want your mom's approval, but in some ways the art critic is probably a source that you should go to. You're looking for different things from the different people because, again, of all the context that all of this is embedded in for you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was more going to wondering, like, what if beauty, I've no evidence to back this up, but what if beauty is less subjective than we have been led to believe, right? Like, there's this famous colloquialism that goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And it seems to me that worth is in the eye of the beholder. Value is in the eye of the beholder. But beauty, not as subjective as we would like to believe, right? Like if I had this yellow bar in front of me, right? This shiny yellow bar, you may not consider that beautiful, right? But if I told you it's a bar of gold, right? A lot of people would say that is beautiful, right? Because it has this value to them.
Yep.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so similarly, like you said something that hits on exactly where I want to be, which is you can destroy a marriage, you can destroy a family, you can destroy a relationship in pursuit of some beauty in and of itself, right? The perfect cake, so to speak, right? It seems to me that that is actively happening right now, all the time. But they are not seeking the cake. They are seeking the beautiful child. I just want my son to be the ideal, beautiful child that I value. And so I'm going to say things to this child that are so hurtful and so damaging, but it will get them to where I need them to be. Yeah. Right?
There's a way in which so Augustine, for example, understood sort of a hierarchy of loves. Okay. And if things are things need to be, love needs to be ordered in order for all of those things to come together. And part of what Augustine said, and this has long been within the Christian tradition, is that God must be your highest love, partly because that's the only safe place for your highest love. Because if you love your family in place of God, you basically turned your family into an idol. Now suddenly you will not only lose your family, you will distort all of your other loves. And so part of what we've been talking about in this little corner of the internet is also the question of nominalism. And one way to break that down is,
what does that mean?
Nominalism is basically the assertion that there are no real relations in the world, that all relations we simply project onto the world. An example for this conversation would be that beauty itself does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
Beauty is only in the eye of the beholder. Now, the fact that that saying has truth, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, does not exhaust the reality that beauty is not only in the eye of the beholder. And again, that is demonstrable, that people, they might form a bell curve, but people will look at something and, they've got facial symmetry, but, Yosemite Valley, why is Yosemite Valley beautiful? I mean, psychologists might talk about the landscaping and vistas and predatory animals and all these kind of things. But the idea is that you have a capacity to apprehend a truth out in the world that you are experiencing as your apprehension of beauty. So in other words, C.S. Lewis in his book, The Abolition of Man, talks about Coleridge, where two people go up to a waterfall. One person says the waterfall is pretty, and the other person says the waterfall is sublime.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the sublimity, sublime, basically is saying that there's a beauty that is coming to us through the waterfall that we are apprehending, that beauty is not merely what I am projecting out into the world, but that what I have is a capacity to apprehend and to see real relations out there in the world. And in fact, via Augustine, Neoplatonism, a bunch of these things, that in fact the beauty of God is shining through the waterfall to me, which is why the United States of America treats Yosemite National Park as sacred.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it isn't just that, these tricks are being played or that Yosemite is precious to me, but now when my grandmother leans over into my grandfather's casket, well, anybody taking a picture of that who doesn't know them might say, well, there's not a lot of beauty at all in that scene, unless maybe you fill in the picture and say, oh, here is a woman who has loved this man for 60 years. And they've had ups and downs and all kinds of things. And here at the end of their marriage, when she says that he is beautiful, she's making a statement about him, about the relationship, about their marriage, about their entire world. So that's part of the question, that beauty is one of these things. And the same with goodness. Is goodness merely in the eye of the beholder, or is there in fact a deeper goodness that shines through the relationships of things in the world that says, oh no, that is good, and in a deeper way than merely human projection, which could be, say, merely psychological. So, and that's in many ways what a lot of the conversations, I mean, the reason Jordan Peterson, I think, came to prominence was he found a way to articulate to people who had sort of dismissed, oh, beauty is something we project into the world. No, maybe it's out there, and meaning too. Maybe, in fact, it's not the sense that I am projecting meaning or beauty onto the world, but I am apprehending these things in the world. And if that is the case, might there also be something beyond and beneath in the world that is worth pursuing? And then might, in fact, our lives be more than just walking around in this terrestrial form.
Can I confess that I didn't understand everything you just said?
Absolutely.
Okay, so back to the waterfall. Can you just go over that one more time, the distinction?
So one person says the waterfall is pretty, and by virtue of the language, it says, well, that the waterfall is pleasing to my eyes, or I think that waterfall is pretty. That's a perfectly fine thing to say. The other person says it's sublime. What are they saying? What is more profound about sublime than pretty? Well,
Is that they're receiving community with...
Well, not receiving community, but there is something that is shining through the waterfall. For example, if someone looks at one of the nudes that you paint and they say, oh, that is beautiful, you want them to mean more than just, well, you know, the light is bouncing off it and it hits my eyes in a pleasing way. And maybe if I'm a man and it's a female form, you know, my testosterone is getting involved. You probably want them to say, no, there are layers of beauty in there. There's the beauty, let's say you made it of a model, even maybe a patched together model in your imagination. There's the woman itself, there's the woman herself, or there's you, the artist, representing it. In fact, there are layers of this that go down, and the fact that nudes have been painted and represented in ways that, you know, what's the the Supreme Court justice, what's the definition of pornography? I probably can't define it, but I know it when I see it. And now that doesn't mean that for some people, the nudes that you draw might be pornographic, but then there's the sense that they are bringing something of themselves to that, making it such, or maybe there's something in you that is lending towards that. I mean, I'm not going to be the judge of that, but it's just that there's more going on than is meaning such just a feeling, or can meaning tell me something deeper about the universe that is truer than just my apprehension of it.
So then everything you just said makes me ask, is beauty insurgent?
And do you want to flesh out insurgents in the way that you're using that word? It's definitely colonizing.
Yeah, viral. Like
oh yeah. Well, why on earth did they, at some point in time, did the American government say, we're not going to let McDonald's put up a burger joint right here in Yosemite Valley? You can buy hamburgers in Yosemite Valley. You can find other places in California that are really beautiful, but everybody got there first before the National Park Service, before we even had the ideas of national park. I mean, by virtue of how we're acting, we're behaving as if there's something sacred about the particular combination of dirt and water and rock and trees and animals in that place.
Don't you dare defile it.
And people, like I said, people come from all over the world spending enormous amounts of money to see what they've seen hundreds of pictures of before.
Yeah.
They want to participate in Yosemite Valley. That's strange.
So
what's going on?
Yeah. So when I said the word insurgent, when I think of an insurgent, I think of an army, right? Like a enemy army, right? Generally, the army, the only way to tell who to kill is what are they wearing, right? What are their clothes? So an insurgent does not wear the right clothes. So essentially, at any moment, they can go from being citizen to enemy, right? And so when I describe beauty as being insurgent, I mean you are not in an art gallery. You are not, you are not in a place that has been predetermined for beauty. You are not doing an activity that is predetermined for beauty, right? You are in a back lot throwing a ball back and forth with your son with a catching mitt, and he throws it so perfect that one time, and you are struck by this insurgent beauty of the perfect lob into your mitt. You didn't even have to move it, right? And the meaning there is, my son is getting better at throwing this ball, right? But you didn't choose for that. Like, the paintings behind me, right? I can't recreate any of those, right? One and done, right? And if I try, it sucks. I have a stack right here of paintings that suck because I tried to make them beautiful,
Yeah.
right? And I wonder, like, if beauty's real, if it's out there, like, I want some. I want to go get some. I want to take an empty IKEA bag and go get some beauty. You know what I mean? But if it's insurgent, I can't because it's hiding.
Right. But it's sometimes hiding, but it's also something that you can't finally possess. You can participate in it. Sometimes you can provoke it, but you can't actually possess it, in the sense that if you, for example, try to withhold it from others, beauty itself abandons you. You can destroy beauty, but then you don't have it either. And we all know what that looks like. So
you want to give an example?
You can destroy a beautiful marriage. You can destroy a beautiful painting. You can put McDonald's up in the middle of Yosemite Valley.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also, you see, this is where beauty to me connects with another Christian word, glory. There's something interesting about glory. Let's say you paint a painting and you've shown it to an art critic and people really like it. And so you've gotten really good at this. And so there's a studio that wants to put up your art. And so there's a show, but nobody knows who you are. And so you walk into the art gallery during the show. You're not wearing a name tag. Nobody's identifying you. Mm-hmm. You can walk around that art gallery. I did this. I painted all of these things. And if you do it in the wrong way, you will take away from the glory and the beauty of all of those paintings. But I would recommend that instead you come into the art gallery incognito and you listen to the people. And they might say, what's that?
Is the operative difference grace?
So there's some of that in there, yes. Because they'll want to know, well, who did this? Why? Well, and if you can diminish the glory of your work, or in a sense, if you come in anonymously, there's wonder about the beauty, and then there's more glory about it.
Mystery.
And you can take it away. You can diminish the glory. Paintings are exactly the same, or you can you yourself will then participate, because you'll also begin to recognize that, well, yeah, you painted everything that's on the walls, but just like you said, you probably won't or can't duplicate any of those paintings.
Mm-mm.
So it's yeah, you did it, but there's a whole lot more mystery going on there.
It's not necessarily mine.
No, you can't possess it. You don't own it. You participate in it. It can flow through you, but it's greater than you. You can destroy it, but what you really want, if you're wise, is for the glory to go on beyond yourself, and so that others can participate in the same thing.
So then, how do we maximize beauty if it disappears when we look at it?
Maximize is a word that we pull off out of a certain toolbox that's probably not the best one in something like that. What we want is for the power of glory to continue to expand, and for us to be able to, in some way, see beauty is a funny thing, because you can go into it, but you have a sense when you're in it that there are deeper ranges still, and that there are limits to your capacity to endure it. It can get to a point that you have to say, okay, enough, I can't take any more. In other words, it's deeper than you are.
Yeah, I have loved someone so much it hurts.
Oh yeah. So, and then once you have that sense, at some point you have to ask yourself, what's going on here?
Yeah. I'm constantly asking myself that question.
what's going, why, how could beauty, even if I produce the painting, how could beauty be deeper than me? What does that mean? And can I go deeper still? And what will that cost me? I mean, you started talking about, buying the field and getting the pearl and having him throw away the pearl.
Mm-hmm.
And that, so what you were looking for when you brought the pearl is participation. That's what you're doing when you're playing music or painting, because you could do it, you could keep it all to yourself. Okay. But you know that if it's shared with another, that there's the potential, might not be realized, there's the potential for participation and glory. Because if your mother looks at it and says, I'm a little, a little uncomfortable with nudes, but I hope this doesn't become, I hope this doesn't derail you in some ugly way, but there's something going on here that is in fact beautiful. And so, and then that adds resonance to a very profound relationship, which is a mother-son relationship.
Yeah, what she ended up saying was, this lady has a very large behind. Which is her way of saying, Tim, this makes me a little uncomfortable, but there is beauty here.
I have to end this by the half hour here. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just letting you know.
Nope. I have already taken up 13 more minutes than I was given, and I appreciate it.
Well, this is fun. This is fun. And yeah, if you'd like me to share this on my channel, you can send me the recording and I'm happy to share it on my channel. If that would help your channel in any way, that would be great. Depending on what your goals are. If I always say this with respect. I mean, if you want to keep it, you can keep it or use it however you want to. But I think it's been a good conversation, and we've explored a lot of really cool things, because I think part of the problem, as a Christian minister, God reveals him. I like to use Isaiah 6. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. And God suggests himself to us all over the place, sometimes in seemingly the most irreverent ways. But the goal is always to have us, to draw us in deeper, beyond ourselves, because we as individuals are too shallow to actually contain everything he wants for us. And so he invites us further up and further in.
Well, out of all the talking heads on the internet, right, I asked you because you display beauty to me, right? Whether it's your face, your voice, your words. I am a moth drawn to a flame. And I'm going to keep moving from flame to flame to flame till I find the big bonfire where everyone's having a good time.
The bonfire is, you know, it's beneath us. And again, I think the way to think about it is that something is shining through us, and we want to get at the source. We have to be careful not to mistake the journey for the destination, because the journey can be wonderful too, but journeys are created by destinations. And so it's so no, keep doing what you're doing, and keep pursuing and asking questions and wanting to go further in, because
Yes, sir.
I pulled up this little website on that describes the Duquesne weekend, and let's see, where does it say here? The story of the Duquesne weekend is a remarkable story of God's gracious and extraordinary response to prayer of some very ordinary people. In Luke 11:9-13, we read these words of Jesus: "Ask and it will be given you, seek and you will find, knock and it will be open to you. If you then who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him?" And in the spring of 1966, 2 Duquesne University professors were asking, seeking, and knocking. And you're doing that, and you're knocking on the door of beauty, because you're saying there's something here going on, and I can see beauty, but I think it's deeper still. And so what you actually want to have is the source of all of this beauty, or rather, not that you can have it, but have it have you, because Christ is the groom and we are the bride. The bride is possessed by the bridegroom and enjoys, that's something that we men don't understand as well as women do, but enjoys being the beloved. And that's the story.
Yeah, he's got to take me to dinner first. Got to call me back. He's got to call me back.
He's been feeding you every day of your life, my friend.
He's got to call me back. He's got to call me back if he wants any of this.
Well, be careful when you knock at that door. I mean, he will answer, and it's a wild ride, as you articulated here. There's always danger.
Yes, sir.
That's what makes the journey adventurous. So
this conversation has been a highlight of 2022 for me. So
we're getting off to a good start.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I don't know what thing you'll do, but let me know whatever you do with it. I can tweet it out on social media, or like I said, if you'd like me to play the video at some point, just let me know, and I'd be happy to share it on my channel.
Will do.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.